Locho sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe tinle yarmoda pelge drolor zampe zeparche palden lame shabla solvade Omo a guru vajra dara sumati muni shasane karm Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Sumati Munisha Sane Karm Uta Vardanya Shri Bad Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Sumati Munisha Uta Vardanya Shri Bad Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke kudan dagi lo, pakyuke sundan dagi nga, pakyuke tukdan dagi yi, ten yerme chiktu jingi lo. Makyuke kudan dagi lo, makyuke sundan dagi nga, makyuke tukdan dagi yi, ten yerme chiktu jingi lo. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakyamuni Soha Sangye Chodan Soge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamgi Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparish Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Danik Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamge Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparesh Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Danik Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamge Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparesh. In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge unto enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So, I try to make it simple, even though it's quite complex. It's very important and fundamental aspect, so-called the correct view of reality. So I'll just read the Tibetan first. And it says, Nielo tope sheramide nange jun janju simla komcheke sibe tsawa chöper minwe pe techir tenre tope tabla be kanshi korde chunam tamcheki gyunre namya luwa medonshi mibe teso kanye kunshi batini sangye gebe lamla shu nawa tenre luwa mebadan tomba kelen chalwe kolwa ni jisi suso nawa tesintu tadon tube gomba topa me namshi rejo mebar chikchartu tenre milor tonwa tsamnine ngeshe yogi zinda kunshik na tetse tawe cheba dzokpa la shenya nawe yoda sewa dan tombe meda se shen tomba ni gyudan rebo charwe tsul shena tarzin tawe chopar mi gyuro. Without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, even though you have generated renunciation and bodhicitta, if it is not possible to cut the root cause of samsara, therefore strive for the method to realize dependent arising. So, what does that mean in few words? The root of our suffering is ignorance. And even though we may develop great love towards ourselves, we may develop great love towards others, which is very special and meaningful and powerful states of consciousness, still we are not able to eliminate the root of suffering. The root of suffering is our own ignorance. For ignorance, which means not knowing, not seeing. The word in Sanskrit for ignorance is avidya. A means know, vid means to see. So to not seeing. So Not seeing what? There are many different types of ignorance. I can have the ignorance of not seeing the content of a box. Simple ignorance, open the box, take away the ignorance. Simple as that. But there are other types of ignorance much more deep. For instance, there is the ignorance of grasping at impermanent phenomenon as if they were permanent. So, for example, let's take for instance this flower, okay? If I have the flower here, and I ask you, is this flower permanent or is it impermanent? As we look to it, I think the most common answer that we would say is the flower is impermanent. But even though we know that the flower is impermanent, when we start observing the way how we perceive it, if I take away the flower and then we look to it again and we ask ourselves, without conceptualizing and analyzing, is the flower the same flower as before or is it different? Has it changed or not? We would say, no, it is the same. In other words, even though the flower is constantly changing, because it's not going to become dry from one instant to the other, we do not perceive these changes. So the flower seems to us as if it was permanent. In other words, the flower appeared to us as being permanent, and what do we do with that appearance? We believe in it. So we grasp at the flower as if it was permanent. What happened in the day that the flower gets dry, or happens something to the flower, and suddenly I see that the flower has changed? Can I become upset with that? Yes. Why? Because the flower is not supposed to be like that. Why? Because my idea is different. So basically what happened is that reality appears to us as being permanent, and we believe in it and we act in accordance with it, even though intellectually, conceptually, we know that things are impermanent. But we are not able to accept it. We are not able to perceive it. So, reality appears to us as being permanent, and we believe in it. And we follow, we act in accordance, when actually it is impermanent. And a lot of suffering is being generated by that. We meet a person, and then we are going to see the person the next day. Who do we expect to meet? The same person as yesterday, or a person slightly different? The same person. Is it possible to meet exactly the same person from day to day? No, not even from minute to minute. Okay. So what happened? We suffer. Because the person appears to us as being permanent, and we believe in it. We grab at the person as if the person was permanent. So, this is one example of ignorance when reality appears to us in a way that is incoherent with actual reality, and we believe in it. So ignorance means to perceive reality in an incoherent way with what reality actually is. Okay? Now, if we're able to perceive the impermanent reality as being impermanent, that's already a big deal. That's already wonderful. It already takes away a lot of suffering. But the main cause, the root of our suffering, is other type of ignorance. It's the ignorance that grasps at reality in a very, very, how to say, incoherent way within everything. Let's try to see it. To understand this, Lama Tsongkhapa tells us here, it is not possible to cut the root of samsara, that is our ignorance. Therefore, strive for the method to realize dependent arising, interdependence. Dependent arising and interdependence, we mean the same thing. So basically, let's try to understand how phenomena exist, how things are. There are basically three levels of interdependence. We have gross, subtle, and very subtle level of interdependence. So there is a gross interdependence, that is the relation between cause and effect. That means, if we are here at this moment, it's because many things have happened for us to be here. Nothing exists independently of its own causes. Everything that exists will bring its own results. Everything is interacting. If I am talking to you and you are listening through a microphone, it means there are many parts and components that are interacting for this to happen, and many things have happened in the past in order for this moment to exist as it is. Okay? So, causes and conditions. This is the first level of interdependence, which is already very important. Second level of interdependence, subtle interdependence. Everything is divisible. Everything is made out of its own parts. Nothing exists independently of its own parts. Okay? If we take any phenomenon, we take the book. What are the parts of the book? The cover, the pages, the paper, the ink, the words, and so on. Okay. Then we take one page. What are the parts of the page? The front, the back, and so on. And then we take the front. And what are the parts of the front? The upper part, the lower part. Then there is this letter here. There is a letter Sha. Look at the letter Sha. Okay, what are the parts of the Sha? There is the little leg, and there is the belly, and a little thing in the front. Then I take the little leg of the Sha. What are the parts of it? The upper part, the lower part. And like this I can go on and on and on and on and divide and divide and divide. And then I get to the atom. Can I divide the atom? Yes. Then I get to the nucleus of the atom. Can I divide the nucleus of the atom? Yes. Until where can I go? Infinite. There were different traditions in India. According to the Madhyamika Prasangika, which is the school we follow, there is no smallest unit. Because every unit is divisible. There is no such a thing as one unit that is the essence of everything, that makes everything up. So, as we divide them, we divide, it's infinite. We can even, according to modern science, you take anything, you take an atom and you go dividing it, there is a moment in which the microscopes that we have, they're not able to go anymore. But theoretically, we can divide into infinite. Okay? It's like space. If you expand or if you divide inside, it's infinite on both sides. Okay? So some people say, everything is made out of nothing. Because when you take anything and you divide, it doesn't matter how solid it may seem. When you divide, actually, finally, you cannot find anything truly solid. My idea is that nothing is made out of something. In the sense that everything is divisible. We cannot find something that is solid, that exists by its own self. Everything that exists depends on its own parts to exist. Okay? Even permanent phenomena. I'm not going to go into that right now, but everything that exists depends on its own parts in order to exist. Okay? So, it may look something very mental, but actually is extremely practical. As everything to exist depends on its own parts, for me to change the entity, the only way I can do is by changing the parts that compose the entity. The only way how I can change the book is changing the pages. The only way how I can change the pages is changing the words that are within the pages. And like this I can go on and on and on. So the only way of changing my behavior is changing the parts that compose my behavior. The only way of eliminating my anger is eliminating the parts of my anger. And like this we can go on and on and on. So we understand that we are made out of parts, and the parts are made out of parts. And when we change a little part, we are changing the whole. Okay? It's a very important concept also. But this brings us to the next level of interdependence. And the question is, what put parts together? What makes the parts to become an unity? What makes this object with all these parts together to be a booklet? What makes the parts to become a unity is a value, a name that is attributed to it. For example, as I talk and you listen, the sounds that I make, the words that I say, when the sound arrives at your own ear, what do you listen as I speak? What arrives to your ear? Sounds or words? Sounds. What do we do to these sounds? We attribute values to it. So the sounds, we get many sounds, we put them together and we say, okay, these sounds put together mean this. That sounds put together means that. Okay? It's like if I start talking in Tibetan, for most of you, most probably are just sounds, no? Ngatanda dene kiran sola pöke kitone kisheba ina manchia kaya kumare. Drasoro chigi mado de la tundra jarne koa leani kaya yomarwa. I just said the same thing in Tibetan, okay? What happened is that basically, as I speak a language that you don't know, what arrives to our ears? Sounds. And we don't know what values to attribute. And it's a bit dangerous because sometimes we may attribute values that have nothing to do with it, okay? It's like in Portuguese and Italian, the word sho means goes away. In Tibetan, sho means come here. And we can have many different things like this, okay? So it's quite clear, no? That when we speak and when we listen, what arrives to our ear side is sounds. What we do to the sounds? We attribute values to it. Okay? Now, when we see something, what appears to our eyesight? Objects, persons, or shape and color? Shapes and colors. That's what appears to our eyesight. Okay? What do we do to that shapes and colors that appear to our eyesight? We attribute values. The same thing is for gestures, no? This just made me remember. In the beginning of the war in Iraq, there was a very sad incident. When they made the first checkpoint to stop, the first cars that were coming, the military were doing like this with their hand for the cars to stop. And they were not stopping. So the first car that came was not stopping at all. When all the military were there doing like this, the soldiers were doing like this for the car to stop, and the car was not stopping, was continuing to come. So they were afraid that it was a bomb or something, so they just shoot the whole car. After they came to learn that in Iraq, this means welcome. Okay? So the gestures, the forms we see, everything are just shapes and colors that appears to our mind. It just thinks that, and onto our eyesight, and on top of that we attribute values to it. Different culture, different values. What for one means one thing, for another means something else. And both of them are right. So, when we see, what appear to our eyes is just shapes and colors. No? It's like, for example, it was said that in the very beginning, when the first ships from the Spanish and the Portuguese arrived in South and Latin America, the natives, when they saw it, they couldn't see the ship. It took a long time for them to be able to see the ship, even though the ship was there for a long time. The same thing they did not so long ago, another test, which like going to a place where people were living in the forest for a very long time, and they have never seen in their culture and everything anything similar to a chair. So they put a chair there, and people could not see it. It's not that they could not see that there was nothing there. Were the colors and the shapes appearing to their eyesight or not? Yes. But they didn't have the concept of chair, so they didn't attribute any value to it. It was just a bunch of wood or whatever. No? It's like when we look to the drawing of a mandala, for example. For many of us, what do we see? Oh, many colors and shapes. For someone else, looking at it, it may be, oh, look there, the whole path to enlightenment. It depends very much what we attribute to it. So, everything that we see, everything that we listen, and also what we touch, what we taste, everything through our senses. We attribute values to it, and based on the values that we attribute, it exists in a way or in another. So, what put the parts together as an unity is the name that we give, which are the characteristics and functions that we attribute to it. Okay? But now, the reality that we live in, is it an objective reality or is it a subjective reality? I would say it's a subjective reality. It depends on the observer. Okay? But how does it appear to us when we see a person, when we experience a situation, when we look at an object, when we listen a word? Does this reality appear to us as being subjective or does it appear to us as being objective? Objective. And what do we do to that objective reality that appears to us? We believe that it is objective and we grasp at it as being objective. So, basically, reality appears to us as being intrinsic, autonomous, independent, objective, when actually it is interdependent, subjective, relative. But we do not know it. It's like the impermanence before. Even though the flower is impermanent, it appears to us as being permanent and we follow it. We grasp at it as being permanent. Similar to that, everything that we see, every situation that we experience, it appears to us as being independent, as being autonomous, as being objective. And we believe in it. We act in accordance. When actually it is interdependent, subjective, relative. Okay? So, let's make one more example. Let's take, for instance, this object here. Okay? How do we call it? We call this a bell, right? Why is it a bell? What a stupid question. It's simply a bell. Okay? This would be the normal way of answering. If we start to analyze it, why is it a bell? Oh, because it has different parts to which we can attribute the name bell, and it can fulfill the functions and the characteristics of such name. Wonderful. But now I come to you and I say, from now on, this is not a bell anymore. From now on, this is my cup on which I would drink my water. Okay? Can it fulfill the functions of a cup? I would say yes. I even tried once. Okay, it can fulfill the function. Maybe it's a bit dirty right now, but I think it can fulfill the functions of a cup. But then, even though I start drinking my water from it, and I say from now on this is a cup, no bell anymore, and you come in the Gompa and you see me drinking the water from this new cup of mine, what would you think most probably? Is the Lama crazy or what? He's drinking from the bell? Or someone may think, oh no, someone with maybe more faith or respect may say, oh, he's drinking the nectar of wisdom because the bell represents wisdom, and then he's drinking from the nectar of wisdom or whatever. Okay? But simply, this is my cup, that's all. Okay? But if I say this, that this is my cup, and I try to drink from it, and I drink from it, and you look at it, how would we see it? The bell that is being used as a cup, or we see it as a cup? The bell being used as a cup. Why? Because for us, this object exists intrinsically, objectively, independently as a bell. Because that's how it appears to us, and that's how we grasp at it. But actually, truly, if we analyze, it doesn't. If we analyze, where is the book? What is the book? And we try to grab at the book and find out what is the book, where is the book. If we look and analyze, finally we will see that the book is nothing more, nothing less than an unity of parts to which is attributed the name book. In other words, is a name, characteristics and functions attributed to a unity of parts. That's what a book is. What is me? If you ask Lama Michel, what is Lama Michel? I am nothing more, nothing less than a name, characteristics and functions, Lama Michel, attributed at a collection of parts. What are the parts? Body and mind. And like this we can go on and on and on. But when we look at something or someone or ourselves, all of this seems to us so solid, so independent, and we believe in it. And we act in accordance, we react in accordance. And then from this strong perception of independence, of being autonomous, of being objective, of this solid intrinsic reality, from this comes selfishness, and then from this come attraction and aversion and anger and jealousy and pride and all the rest. So this is the main cause of our suffering. It's the root of our suffering. For instance, what's the only difference between an object of anger and an object of compassion? The same person, same moment, being looked by three people. For one, is an object of anger. For the other, is an object of compassion. And for the other, is an object to rejoice about. What's the only difference between the three? The value that they attribute to it. One person may say, oh, you look how bad you are, what you are doing, I want to kill you. Anger. The other may look and say, oh, I'm so sorry that you act out of so much ignorance. I deeply pray for you to be free from your ignorance, and I hope that you can stop harming yourself and others. Compassion. And the other one may say, oh, how good that you are harming these people. I also don't like them. Okay? What's the difference between the value that was attributed to it? Okay. And it's not that the value that we attribute has a big power, it has a total power. It makes a total difference. But this doesn't mean that reality is only in our mind. That's important also. It's not because I believe in something that necessarily it will exist, just because I believe in it. Let's say that I am walking out in the evening here and there is something on the floor and I believe it's a snake. And I get afraid of the snake and I get running away, but actually it was a piece of rope. In my personal reality, even though I believe it's a snake, it is not a snake. It's a wrong perception. Why? Because even though I believe completely that it's a snake, can it bite me? No. So it's not a snake. It's a wrong perception. There are wrong views. There are wrong perceptions. When we believe in something, we can pass our whole life believing it was a snake. But still, in our reality, it was not a snake. Why? Because it was a wrong perception. In that moment, I run away. Why? Because I have a wrong view. And I believe strongly that it is a snake. And I react out of it. And I believe that it is a snake strongly. But even though I believe completely, it is still not a snake. Why? Because the unity of parts to which I attribute the name snake cannot fulfill its functions. So what happened is that it's not because reality is relative that everything can exist just as we believe in it. It's not like that. It is important that when we attribute a value, when we impute a name, the unity of parts must be able to fulfill the functions and characteristics of the name that we are attributing. Then it's a correct perception. What is meant by wrong and right perception? A wrong perception is when the name that we attribute, the characteristics and functions that we attribute, are able to be fulfilled by the parts in which we attribute it. When we attribute something and the names and the parts are not able to fulfill the functions and characteristics, it's a wrong perception. So for example, let's say two people start discussing about something. Can that happen? I look at something and I say, this is like this. And you say, no, it's not like that. It's something else. Can we discuss because of something like this? Can we end up fighting because of something like that? I think it happens quite often. So what's a good way of doing, for example, is before start to discuss very badly, let's say, okay, what are the values and characteristics that you are attributing to this object? This, and that. Okay, and what are yours? Can the object fulfill both? Yes, then we are both right. No, it cannot fulfill yours, then you're wrong. It's not that my view is necessarily the right and your view is necessarily the wrong, or vice versa. Also because it's not that there is a reality that each one of us will perceive differently. What exists is a unity of infinite individual realities. In other words, external reality does exist, but it does not exist independently of the individual internal reality of each one of us. And the internal reality also exists in dependence of the external reality. It's like here and there, big and small. When I have two mountains, this mountain and that mountain. When I am in this mountain, what is the other mountain? That mountain. When I go to that mountain, what did that mountain become? This mountain. And this mountain became that mountain. Okay? So this is to show that things are mutually dependent. Okay? In the same way, internal reality and external reality, one depend on the other. In other words, can the book exist independently of the name book that I attribute to the object? No. But can the name book be sustained without the parts? Also not. Okay. And what happened is that the perception of book can only exist based on the object. But the object book can only exist when there is the perception book, when the value is attributed. Maybe it's a little bit more complex. But what happened is that, let me try to make an understanding. We go again. The perception book, the mind that perceives the book. Can the mind that perceives the book exist without the existence of the book? No. The mind that perceives the book cannot exist without the book. Okay? But can the book exist without the mind that perceives the book? No. Otherwise it will be just a unity of parts. That's why they are mutually dependent. One depends on the other. It's the question, who came first, the chicken or the egg? Okay? It's more or less that same way. So what happened is that internal reality and external reality are dependent, are interdependent. One from the other, dependent. They depend on each other to exist. They are actually of the same nature. Okay? So this is something that we need to reflect upon very clearly. And then from this we will go on now to the next part of the text to try to understand it a little bit deeper. But it's a subject that takes long time for us to reflect again and again to try to understand it. Let's conclude with the last verses about emptiness. As they say, Kanshi korde chunam tamchiki gyunren namya luwa medon shi mikbete so kain kunshi bate ni sange gebe lamla shu nawa tendre luwa meba dan tomba kelen tralwe kowani jisi sosor nawa tesi tu tadun tube gomba tokpa me namshi rejo mebar chik chartu tendre milur tonwa samyine ngeshi yugi zinda kun shikna tetse tawe cheba zopa la shenya nawe yoda sewa dan tombe meda seshin tomba ni gyudan rebo charwe tsushena tarzin tawe trebar mi gyurom. Those who perceive the inevitable nature of cause and effect of all phenomena of samsara and nirvana and totally destroy the grasping mind's object of perception have at that time entered the path pleasing the Buddhas. This means those that realize that phenomena are inevitably interdependent, both pure and impure phenomena, which means samsara and nirvana. It doesn't matter if it's phenomena that is polluted by defilements and karma, or a phenomena that is not polluted by defilements and karma. Everything that exists, it's interdependent. When we can understand this, and at the same time totally destroy the grasping mind's object of perception, which is inherent existence. The grasping mind means the mind that grasps at reality as being of inherent existence. When we are able to destroy these two, to destroy the grasping at inherent existence, and at the same time perceive the interdependence of phenomena, at that time you have entered the path that pleases the Buddhas. You have entered the correct path. As long as the two realizations of appearance, the infallibility of interdependence, and that of emptiness, the freedom from assertion, which means the realization that everything is interdependent, and the realization that everything lacks inherent existence, lacks objective, autonomous, inherent existence, when these two realizations are considered separate, there is not yet the realization of the thought of the capable one, the realization of the thought of Buddha. Sadly, this has happened many times in history, of people seeing the two things are different. Oh, this is how phenomena exist, they are interdependent, but in an absolute level is something else. And separating two things. Okay? So as long as you see the two things separately, which is the lack of inherent existence, emptiness, and interdependence, cause and effect, as being two separate things, you are not on the path. You are on the wrong way. When these two realizations, that of interdependence and that of emptiness, the lack of inherent existence, exist simultaneously without alternating on the same object, and merely seeing the infallibility of interdependence completely destroys the way all objects are apprehended as truly existent, then the analysis of the ultimate view is indeed complete. Which means, in the moment that we can, on the same object, let's say the cup, okay? We can, on the same object, perceive that a cup is interdependent. It depends on causal conditions. The cup depends on its own parts to exist. The cup depends on the basis of imputation, their parts, and the imputation of the name, the values attributed to it in order to exist as a cup, and so on. It's interdependent, and because it's interdependent, it lacks inherent existence. Okay? Why do we talk about the lack of inherent existence? Why do we talk about emptiness? Someone may think, oh, wouldn't it be enough just to talk about interdependence? In one way, yes, but finally, no. Why? Our mind has a very particular capacity, that is, we are able to eliminate a state of mind once we generate a directly opposite state of mind. We are not able to have both together. And the root of our suffering is not the lack of understanding of interdependence. The root of our suffering is the grasping at inherent existence. So how do I eliminate the mind that grasps at inherent existence? Realizing the lack of inherent existence. Okay? That's why we talk about emptiness as the ultimate cure, as the ultimate antidote to ignorance. Okay? Because what causes our suffering is not the ignorance of not seeing interdependence. It's the ignorance of grasping at inherent existence when actually it doesn't exist. So, for that reason, we need to generate the mind that realizes the lack of inherent existence, that the mind that realizes emptiness, that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. This is the antidote, the direct antidote to the ignorance that grasps at inherent existence. Okay? So, when we are able to see at the same object its interdependence, and because it's interdependent, it lacks inherent existence, and it lacks inherent existence because it's interdependent, and vice versa. And it's only interdependent because it lacks inherent existence. And it only lacks inherent existence because it is interdependent. When we can see that they both are simultaneously in the same object, and merely seeing the infallibility of interdependence completely destroys the way all objects are apprehended as truly existent, then the analysis of the ultimate view is indeed complete. Okay? Furthermore, appearance eliminates the extreme of existence, and emptiness eliminates the extreme of non-existence. Appearance means interdependence, the way how things are, eliminates the extremes of externalism, which means the extreme of believing that reality exists independently, objectively. Okay? Because in the moment that I see that a cup is interdependent, the cup cannot exist by its own characteristics. The cup cannot exist in an inherent way, in an objective way, because it's interdependent. So realizing the interdependence eliminates the extreme of appearance, or the extreme of existence, or the extreme of eternalism. Okay? While emptiness, the realization that the cup lacks inherent existence, eliminates the extremes of nihilism, the extreme of non-existence. Why? Because the extreme of non-existence is the idea that nothing exists, it's all in your mind. But if the cup is empty of inherent existence, the cup can only be empty of inherent existence because the cup exists. So by emptiness, we eliminate the extreme of nihilism. Okay? So, if you realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, then you will not be taken by wrong notions, holding extreme views. In other words, in the moment that you realize that everything that is interdependent lacks inherent existence, and then it lacks inherent existence because it is interdependent, one is a different side of that. It's like two sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other. Relative truth and absolute truth. Relative truth, interdependence. Absolute truth, emptiness, lack of inherent existence. They are of the same nature. A Buddha doesn't make any distinction between the two. The only reason why we make distinction between the two is because of our own ignorance at the moment, and we are not able to put the two together in our perception. So, I'm not going into very much details about that right now. But what happened is that in the moment that we realize that the two are together, that as it says in the Guru Puja, in the Heart Sutra, form is empty, emptiness is form. Form is emptiness, emptiness. Sunyi tompa o tompa ni sukso. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. When we realize the relative and absolute are of the same nature, that the form and the emptiness of form are of the same nature, that one doesn't exist independently of the other, this is when we are on the right path. This means we are understanding clearly that we are not talking about a parallel reality that is absolute, and then there is a relative reality somewhere else. It's all the same. In other words, we need to observe how do reality appear to us? What is our own perception? And it becomes so important for us to understand, to see our own ignorance. To see how phenomena appear to me as being of inherent existence, as being objective, independent, autonomous. I must see it. When I'm able to see how my mind grasps at reality, my mind grasps at reality as being of inherent existence, then I see that actually it's not like that, then I have realized the first level of realization about emptiness. It's like, if there is someone that I know that there is someone that is a thief, that is robbing from my house. But what happened is that I'm not sure really who he is. But one day I'm able to see him robbing. I don't know yet how to prove it, but I know it's him. This is when we are able to see our ignorance and we say, I got you. I don't know yet how to prove it, but I got you. That's what is called the realization of listening about emptiness. The wisdom of listening about emptiness. That's the first step. Then after that, we need to get to a point where we have a clear understanding why phenomena lack inherent existence. Then the next step is we take that clear understanding and we focus our mind single-pointed in it with shamatha and vipassana, pure state of concentration. And then that means the realization of the wisdom of meditation about emptiness. And from that state of meditation, gradually, we can get so familiarized that we have an experience, non-conceptual perception of the lack of inherent existence. And that's what is called the realization of emptiness, the direct realization of emptiness. That's when the practitioner reaches the path of seeing. That's when the practitioner eliminates ignorance and gets out of samsara. Okay? But the process is there. It's called path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing. After the path of seeing, there is still the path of meditation, where we have all the next 9 bhumis to go, which basically is eliminating the appearance of inherent existence. After that, the appearance still comes, but the practitioner knows that is not true. Buddhahood is in the moment that there is no more appearance of inherent existence. That's the actual state of Buddhahood. Okay. So, the important thing for us to understand is that there is a path. There is a path to be followed, and we can follow this path. Someone may think, oh, that's too complicated, too long. If you never start, sure. But if we start observing our mind, observing interdependence, understanding interdependence, how things exist, how things function, depend on cause and conditions, their parts, what are the names that I attribute to things, the parts, can they sustain the functions or not? We start to analyze reality around us. It helps a lot. Until when we are able to see how we perceive reality, and we are able to see our own ignorance that grasps at inherent existence. Then from that we start moving on to understand truly how it is and start to meditate upon it and eliminate our own ignorance. Okay? This is a subject that is quite deep. It takes long to understand. It is something that personally I have read so many times, and after maybe 20 times the same point and suddenly, I got it. It's something that we need to repeat many times to ourselves. And then gradually we grab the point. But it's fundamental. It's the key of the whole path. Okay? If we are able to realize this, all the rest is done. But in order to do this, we need also compassion. We need also love. These are the 2 wings for enlightenment. Love, compassion, and wisdom that realize the true nature of reality. Is the 2 wings that we need to reach enlightenment. Okay? Method and wisdom. So, the conclusion is in this way, when you have realized the crucial points of the 3 principal aspects of the path, seek solitude and generate the power of enthusiastic effort. You will quickly accomplish your final goal, my child. Which means, once you have realized the essential points, once you have understood the meaning of renunciation, definite emergence, the meaning of bodhicitta, true love and compassion towards others, the wish to reach enlightenment for their benefit, once you have understood and realized the correct view of reality, the meaning of the correct view of reality, don't keep it just as an understanding. Put yourself in solitude, which means go away from all distractions that you may have and give priority in your life with effort to meditate upon it and to realize it. If you do in that way, you will quickly accomplish your final goal of Buddhahood, my child. So in this way, Lama Tsongkhapa conclude, giving us an incentive to practice, to sit down, to meditate, to familiarize. He's saying, I believe in you, so do it. Okay? And there is a verse of conclusion by Gedugpa Rinpoche, which was one of the main disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa, and he says, Tek chen lam gi shung shin chan chup sem. Bodhicitta, that is the essence, like the main pillar holding the Mahayana path. Yandata weneda rimni la. The essence of the correct view of reality and the two stages, which means the generation stage and the completion stage of the Tantra. By having unfaulty understanding, a clear understanding about it, by reaching a clear understanding about it, and by applying effort, may I bring into my heart and realize what you have taught to me. So what have you taught, Lama Tsongkhapa? Bodhicitta, which comprehends inside of it is renunciation. Bodhicitta, correct view of reality. Generation stage, completion stage of the Tantra. May I understand it clear and have the effort to practice it, and by that may I realize it in this life. Okay? So this is the prayer that Gedugpa Rinpoche did, and that we repeat here today. Okay? So, with this we conclude for today. I wish to make one other weekend soon to talk about the correct view of reality, because I think it's a subject that really is worth of dedicating more time to it, so that we can go a little bit more deep into some aspects, and it's something quite important, okay? Tek chen lam gi shun shi chan chubu sem yanda ta we ne da rim ni ala trul me nge pa nye ne tsem pa yi Kyo son drupa nimpo che baresho Je tsun la me kutse rab tenchi Nam karatin le cho churge pada Lo san tempe drume sa som ki Drove musela taktu ne gyurchi Ni modele tsendele Ni me kunyan delekshin Nin tsen tak tu delekpe Concho sum ki chingialo Concho sum ki ngodrubotso Concho sum ki tra shisho At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.